Hi, I'm Ari, I'm the Oak Witch, and in today's video I'm going to show you 5 beginner witch book recommendations. So on this channel I like to be honest with you guys, and I think with my first video on beginner witch book recommendations, I think I tried to fit in too many books, like 10 books into one video. This time around I'm going to be giving 5 book recommendations. I'm going to be going into them in a little bit more depth and giving a well-rounded review. So without further ado, the first book I want to recommend is Witchcraft by Roger J. Horne. So to be honest, this is probably my favourite of the 5 I'm going to show you. I really like this book. This book is printed through Amazon, so that's where I got it from. It's quite a short read, the text is quite big, so I'd say it's very beginner friendly. So this book talks about witchcraft based on a folk magic tradition. Now obviously folk magic is not something that is singular, it's not this one thing. Folk witchcraft is obviously going to be something which depends on the type of folk magic you are practicing. So I will say this book is quite biased to folk magic from the British Isles, British folk magic, but I think he describes a base structure of folk witchcraft which can be easily adaptable to, you know, your own folk magic approach, which is maybe outside of British folk magic. And I think there's some practices in here which he talks about, which is just so useful, and it's not really talked about in many Witch 101 books. For example, I loved his emphasis on spirit work and like working with your local land spirits and plant spirits. I really liked the spirit flight techniques as well in here. I think he just lays out a lot of these seemingly complicated practices really simplistically, and I think for a beginner who perhaps is less interested in the neo-Wicca eclectic witchcraft, which is quite prevalent online and in a lot of like popular modern witchcraft books, I think if you're not really into any of that, that's not really your jam, and you're more into the tradcraft folk magic side, then I definitely recommend getting this book. I think this book is quite simple, but I think he explains it really well. I think he displays this approach in a way which is really accessible and easy to do. So with this book, I think it could have been a bit longer. It's quite a short book, so it's not a hugely challenging read. I think Roger J. Horne could have described perhaps the folk witchcraft approach and how to apply that to other cultural folk magic traditions. I don't think that's expressed as much as it could have been, because obviously folk witchcraft is not a singular thing really. His approach that he's writing about is from the British folk magic lens. But perhaps there could have been a bit more expansion, but again, this is quite a short book, and the author speaking from his own experience, and his own experience is clearly with, as it says on the back, Scottish cunning craft, and he does talk about Appalachia folk magic here, Appalachia yarb doctoring, which I don't really have many experience in, so I can't really say anything about that. But from the contents of this book, it is very much British folk magic based. So perhaps if that's not really your thing, you probably won't like this, but I still think it's a good read based on just the fundamentals of spirit work that he talks about. The animist approach to witchcraft, I think you'll still get a lot out of it, even if British folk magic isn't necessarily your background. One last disclaimer I want to give with this book is that he does mention, if I remember correctly, he does mention like burying stuff, and if you have seen my videos in the past, you know that's not really my kind of thing. I like to be as eco-friendly as possible in my craft, and he kind of recommends burying stuff outside. Which, you know, I'm not gonna cancel the book for it. It didn't ruin my experience with the book, but it is something which I would personally want to say, hey, I don't do this, I don't recommend doing this, but it is in here, and, you know, all I can do is advise. But yeah, that is Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horne. Now, as I said, this is printed through Amazon, I'm pretty sure. I got it through Amazon. I couldn't really find it anywhere else, but I can leave some links below for where to get the book, and I'll put in the description, so yeah, if you're struggling to find it on your own, I'll have some links down below. So the second book I'm recommending is 6 Ways by Aidan Wachter. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, I'm really sorry. I've never heard that name being said before, so apologies if I've got that wrong. but this is Approaches and Entries for Practical Magic. The disclaimer, there is a fair amount of the author's own experience in the book. However, he's a very good writer, it's written with purpose. Some books where I see they list their UPG and they just use it as an excuse to talk about themselves, it's not really written a lot with purpose, but his own experiences are included to make sense and to guide the reader and to actually explain how to practice the magic he's talking about. This book essentially says, hey, here's my experience, this is what works to me, and this is how you do it. And I think that is a really refreshing read. So why I chose this book, because it is beginner friendly, it's not a very long book, it's quite an easy read. There are a few like grammar and spelling mistakes in here, but I think it's because it's self-published, so it doesn't ruin the experience of the book, or at least it didn't ruin mine. But he goes over techniques such as trance induction, which I don't think I've seen, or I don't think I've personally read a Witchy 101 book that goes over that in the way that, like, he makes it so easy to understand and really doable. And yeah, you know, I really like this book. It's got that focus of like, just do the magic. Doing the magic is how you will learn. Whereas I feel like you do tend to see Witchy 101 books that are emphasis on the, oh, here's how you do the spell, here's the method, here's the ingredients. And they don't really explain the techniques of the magic, the actual doing and the actual experience. I feel like he does that here. I mean, straight off the bat, he gets you to practice magic. I won't spoil that too much, but I thought it was so cool that immediately he was like, hey, do magic. So yeah, if you're not really into spirit work, then you probably won't like this book. He takes a very animist perspective. I'm an animist, so I think it's really cool. I really like this book, but if spirit work, you know, is not your thing at all, offerings to house spirits, land spirits, if that's not your thing, then perhaps actually you probably won't like this book. He does talk about other things, for example, things like sigils. He does talk about spell work in here. And again, like I said before, the trance induction, those I think are core things which, you know, to do with energy work, and I think that is still useful for a beginner witch, even if you don't like spirits or spirit work. But I will say that there is a fair amount of spirit emphasis in here. Just thought I'd mention that, but I really like this book. So my next recommendation is The Little Work by Durgadas, Allon, Duriel. I've spoken about this book a lot on my channel before. Like a good few videos I've spoken about this book, and I'm officially recommending it on this one. So there's a lot I guess I want to say about this book. One, compared to the previous books I've shown you, this will be a lot of a heavier read. So this book was written by a professional psychologist, and you'll see that throughout the book. He takes a psychological model in quite a few places, obviously because it's a big part of his practice and his life experience. In this sense, he goes over topics like not only just creating a daily magical practice, but, you know, why do spells fail, burnout, imposter syndrome. He goes through feelings of doubt as well, and all those things I think a lot of people experience, not just experienced practitioners, but as well beginners. I mean, I know that when I was starting out, having those, trying to work out in my head what I believe and coming across feelings of doubt and imposter syndrome, I think a lot of us experience it throughout our journey, throughout our progression. I think this book will help you come to terms with it and reach a sort of like middle ground in a way. I think he really helps you. He just gives really good advice, and I think it's just really refreshing and really uplifting. He frames magic, which is something which isn't just about, you know, material gain. It's about that inner alchemy. It's about making changes in your life, and it's a inward progression. While I don't necessarily agree with everything he sort of approaches in the book, for example, he takes a Western occult tradition focus throughout the book, which I don't personally ascribe to. However, the baseline fundamentals of what he talks about throughout the book I think is massively valuable. As I said before, obviously he's a professional psychologist, so in here is actually quite a lot of good mental health advice. There's one section which I think was really great, and that was the Wachter chapter called Allowing Our Emotions. And honestly, it's just great advice that obviously does apply magically, but just applies like in your mental health mundanely as well. And I think obviously for a lot of us, spirituality and mental health intersects and overlaps. So actually having a book like this that goes through that process and gives you really lovely exercises to do, which will actually help you shape your practice in this regard, I think is so useful. Yeah, I really like this book. So disclaimer, as I said before, it's a bit more of a challenging read compared to the prior books I've recommended, but I think it's massively valuable. I would just say take your time with it. I took my time with this book and I think that helped me overall. If you need to dip in and out of it, I would say to do so, because there are exercises in here which are actually really good to do and are not like a, you know, a one-time sort of thing. One of the main things which I think this book does really well is helping you create a daily practice. Now, I've spoken about daily practice before in one of my videos, which I'll link somewhere. I can't remember which way around it is. But so if you're someone who really struggles with incorporating magic into your day-to-day life, this book will help you do that. So that's why I'm recommending this book. So my fourth recommendation is Llewellyn's Complete Book of Correspondences by Sandra Kynes or Kynes, I don't know. But this book, this one is a chonky boy. It is a big book, and don't let that fool you though, because all throughout the book are these tables. The entire book is just these tables of information. So the whole book is full of correspondences of plants, of trees, flowers, minerals like crystals, animals, there's deities, there's things like cardinal directions, colours, elements, astrological signs, the seasons, so much stuff. But I think what is so useful is the intentions, issues and powers chapter, which is the first chapter, and it goes through correspondences for certain like intentions that you'd use in spell work. Very useful, and I think just for that alone it's quite a good purchase. As you can see, it's just tables, so there's no context throughout the book for each of the correspondences, for the information. There's no background context. There is a bibliography section which is fairly decently sized, so I'm not too worried that obviously research has gone into this, but I think I would be wary of beginners taking a book like this, which is, yes, very useful, but using that as the only research that you do. Do not use this alone. Treat this as like Wikipedia. So you go in and you want to find something, see what they said here, and then do extra research. That is the caveat I want to give with this book. Do not just rely on this, because there's things, for example, let's go to a plant, Angelica. So there's like zodiac, solar system, rune, celebrations, element, energy, tarot, you know, there's angel and goddess and those correspondences and those categories. So without any context to those, it might be a bit like, why? Where'd you get that from? Obviously you can go to the bibliography and then do that background research yourself, but obviously I think it's good to perhaps take Angelica and do more research through other sources, through other resources, to see if they say the same thing, cross-referencing basically. But overall, I think this is a great book for a beginner to have, as just to be able to understand and get a baseline introduction. I really think it's useful. And obviously, as you get more experienced, as you get more knowledgeable, and as your craft develops, going to something like this is just good for a refresher. I find myself like mid-ritual or mid-working or just mid-research going, oh, let's just see what it says in here. So you go to look and then you get reminded of, because my memory is terrible, so having something like this is really useful. So that's why I'm recommending it. Now, the last book I have is this one, and it is A History of Magic, Witchcraft and the Occult. And it's by a bunch of different authors, but it's published by DK. Now, not only is this book stunning, it is really useful. Now, just to say off the bat, do I think you'll learn everything there is in the history of witchcraft from this book? Probably not. But But for a beginner, for someone who's completely new, I think actually having a book like this, just to dip your toe into the history of magic throughout the ages, throughout different cultures over time, it's so useful. And I'll show you some of the images of what I mean. For example, here is a page on protective objects, and they've sort of listed them side by side through different cultures. There's Ganesh from Hinduism, there's scarab beetle from ancient Egypt, scorpion papers as a Jewish magical charm, etc, etc. So it's so interesting to have that comparative analysis in a way. And I think why I like this book a lot as well is because it's very visual. There's a lot of pictures combined with actually very nicely concise information. So if you struggle with reading really text heavy fine print academic writing, starting with a book like this to help you just get background knowledge and just base information, and then actually if you find a topic in here which really interests you, use that and then go further. I think there's a lot of great information in here, and it'll help you understand it better when it's paired with like artifacts and paintings from history. It really will help you sort of get that context to be able to understand the information, the history better. I think this is really beginner friendly, so I do recommend starting with this if you're really interested in learning more about history of magic and witchcraft, and then going beyond and doing more research on topics which are more specialized and more specific. Yeah, I think this is a great place to start, and it's a beautiful book as well. It's quite an easy read as well. You know, the information is good and there's a lot to learn in here. But I think it's quite easily digestible as well, which is why I think it's so beginner friendly. So although I'm recommending this book for beginners, I wouldn't say to just rely on this, as you know, that's my little caveat. It is written by academics, as you can see at the beginning here. You can see who's contributed to the book, and they are academics, so I'm not too worried about the information being bad. But I would say obviously it's best to continue your research on the history of witchcraft, perhaps looking at a bit more resources that are more specialized in a specific topic, and just broaden and deepen your knowledge. But yes, I'm recommending this because I think it's a good baseline. I think actually reading this book will help you really visualize and see magic develop throughout time, and see the different approaches different cultures have towards magic, towards the occult. It's really interesting, and you'll get a good idea of actually a lot of the practices that you see in modern witchcraft, and you'll notice, oh, that's where that's from. So it's good to get that context and good to do your historical research. So that's why I'm recommending this book. So yeah, those are my 5 beginner witch recommendations for you today. Again, like I said before, I'll leave links to where you can get them below. I'll try broaden the options a little bit for not just the UK resources. I'll see what I can find. For anyone who is interested, I have a new book club starting again soon, and we are reading The Crooked Path by Llewellyn, which I haven't personally read before, so I'm excited to read it. We're gonna start this book club on the 6th of September, which is the following Monday from when this video is being released. So yeah, if you want to come and read this book with me and people on my Discord server, come join. The link is below. And yeah, I'm really excited for that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.